Hello, beautiful people. I hope all is well. I hope all is well. We have jumped on live today to have a very interesting conversation around another element, another, I guess you can say, a facet of the dating and relationship space, where we will be talking to Miss Tanisha Wood about matchmaking. So you guys know that I always talk to you about being clear on what you're looking for out of a partner and a partnership, doing the eternal work, making sure you're the best version of yourself. We can do that work and still sometimes have a hard time finding an appropriate match. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and invite Miss Tanisha on. How does one get a matchmaker, work with a matchmaker? How does the whole thing work? Thank you for everyone who's joining the live. I appreciate you. And I believe
Hi, how are you?
Hello. Oh, I love the hair. You look amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. A little top bun action.
Yeah, you look great. So am I pronouncing it right, Tanisha?
Yes, Tanisha.
All right, good. So this is Miss Tanisha Wood. Miss Tanisha, can you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yes, I am Tanisha Wood. I am a matchmaker and dating coach and founder of the Broomless Matchmaking, which is a matchmaking service for Black professionals. I am originally from Jamaica, grew up in Minneapolis, have sort of lived all over, back in Minneapolis at the moment, and moving to Atlanta. So it's actually the first time I'm like announcing this.
Well, congratulations, and I'm excited
Thank
for you and your move. Okay, so I know that time is of the essence. I started late. You've got things to do. You look amazing. I'm sure you got great things to do. So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
First of all, tell us about your background. How did you get into the dating and relationship space?
Yeah, so I actually got into this work really naturally, meaning I moved to a new city. So I was living in, like I told you, I grew up in Minneapolis, moved to San Francisco. Once I got to San Francisco, I literally knew nobody. And so I started on the apps. And this was back in the day before they were actually apps. I mean, you would go to www.match.com on your desktop. And so I started meeting a lot of men, but not everybody was for me. But I was young and I was like having a good time. But when I would meet people and they weren't for me, like I kept in touch. So I wasn't one to just throw people away simply because, the date didn't go well or they weren't for me. And as I started to meet more girlfriends, I would introduce them. And so after a while, friends would come to me, asking if I knew anybody, if, I'd recently gone out with anybody. So I just kind of became that person. And then same thing once I moved to New York. And then once friends of friends started asking, I thought, well, somebody needs to pay me for this. So that's when I started coaching, started helping with people with profiles, and all that sort of stuff. So prior to 2015, I was also doing like a corporate sales job. And then after 2015, really transitioned out of that into doing this work full time.
Okay. So I get it in terms of you meeting people, you're seeing the connection, you're making connections. And that was kind of like in passing. But now in a professional way, how do you make matches? What's the algorithm or like what's the methodology behind those matches?
Yeah, so matchmaking is both an art and a science, right? So there's the overarching big stuff, like I'm never going to try to convince anybody to change their religion or whether they want kids. So there's all that stuff that has to be in place. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, it's really like a vibe and a feeling. So oftentimes I'll be talking to a client and they're sort of just telling me about themselves and explaining what they want. And it's almost like I have a mental database. Like I actually have a physical one too, but it's like I'm going through the database. I'm like, ooh, she would be good with such and such. Ooh, he would really like her. So yeah, it's a little bit of an art and a science. And a lot of it comes from really listening to people, but not listening to just what they're saying, but really understanding what's behind the things that they're saying. So, sometimes people will come to me with list and requests and, I try my best, but I always try to understand like what's really behind that. Why do you want the things that you want? And sometimes, clients will recognize that it's not, they'll say things like, they have to be this age or they have to live in this city. And you start to just uncover fears that are behind the things that they say. Mm-hmm. And you're able to just like take a lot of those walls down and help them understand, like, you got to be more open. Like the person that you really want and you really need, is out there, but you can't sort of put blinders on with list.
Understood. So Tanisha, tell us who you work with. Like, tell us about this ideal client. Who is the right person to reach out to you for support?
hmm So I work with Black professionals over 28. So everybody I work with has at least a bachelor's degree, earns at least 75K, and then most importantly is looking for something committed and long term. So, one of the reasons that I do have these parameters is because I've recognized, both in my own experience in the professional world, that the higher you rise, the harder it is to meet like-minded Black professionals. So this is really a space for those people to connect and meet each other.
Got it. So in terms of the salary requirement, you did mention the 75K. There's a
hmm
lot of conversation in the community about women perhaps having a standard of a salary, but men not necessarily being as invested. Is that
hmm
standard the same for men and women, no matter who your client is, or are there any flexibilities based on gender?
Yeah, so for everybody that joins, they have to earn at least 75K. But to your point, I do find that, men care less about that. Like men aren't as concerned with the salary that a woman is making. There's other traits that go into it for men, but for women, I think that security and stability is important, even if we are ourselves earning enough to, sort of provide ourselves with those things. I think that's still important for women. And that just goes back to, biology and caveman days.
Yep. No, I'm with you and I agree 100%. So Journey to Jubilation actually brings up a great point, and she says that she thinks being a matchmaker would be so cool, but would feel bad if she matched a couple and it turned out bad. So have you had instances of like, not like they broke up, because that's the nature of relationships. They start,
hmm
they end, but like
hmm
things going bad, and how did that make you feel? Did it make you doubt yourself at all? What does that look like in your profession?
Yeah, so I think, what happens when things go bad ultimately is a lot of the times people go out on a date and they say, it just didn't connect with that person. Generally most of the time I'm not dealing with like, oh my God, the date went horrible, he was the worst. Because of the vetting that I do, I generally don't end up with people that, would do things that are like atrocious on a date. I will say though, one time I felt so horrible. So I'm big on activity dates. I like for people to get outside of their comfort zone and not always just, sit at dinner and do the normal stuff. So I like planning like indoor rock climbing, axe throwing, canoeing. And so one time I planned a canoeing date, and it turned out that it was supposed to be a boat, but it actually turned out to be a canoe. So I planned it as a boat, but it was this canoe. She had a fear of water and being close to the water in that way. The canoe was motorized and it ended up getting stuck on the lake. So it turned out to be kind of a disaster, but they laughed about it and ended up going out on another date. So like it ended up being fine and like a laughable moment because they were both sort of lighthearted, open people. But yes, in cases where things like that happen, I'm like, oh my Lord, what did I do? Uh, but for the most part, when people don't necessarily connect in the way that I would like, I see it as an opportunity for learning and feedback. So the feedback is the most important part of the process, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where we're really diving in and understanding, well, like, what didn't you like exactly? Because that's important. It's just as important to know what you don't like and what doesn't work for you as it is to know what does. And so I always see that especially after their first match, that's like where we do the most feedback and we dive deep. And sometimes it truly comes down to just the chemistry wasn't there. But if it's other things, like I really like to understand why that is and, help people open up. I always say, unless something went crazy or unless somebody was like disrespectful, I think most dates are worth a second date. Like give people a little time to like loosen up and ease up and like, like you get to know somebody better on a second date. They're more themselves.
Nice, nice. And yeah, I hear that. I hear what you're saying about the date itself being like tragic or like a like a cluster F, right? But not their time spent together. So and I'm
Right.
sure that also in very stressful situations, I think it's important to see how folks function, right? Like are
Mhm.
they able to
Mhm.
support you when you're going through a tough time? So that's really key. Can you talk to us about the process? So if I were a single woman, I would do what? Like, what is the process like to work with you to get to the end result?
Yeah. So if you are a single man or single woman and you are serious and ready to meet somebody, you would start by applying, filling out our application, and then we would have a call with one of our dating strategists. And in that call, that's where they would just get to know you, ask you basic questions about your dating in the past, what you want, what you're looking for, etc. If at that point we decide that you're a good fit for a client, we will then schedule a vetting call with you. And that call is about 2 hours. And that's where we talk about everything from communication style to therapy, family background, relationship history, finances, religion, politics, sex, but just everything to make sure that the things that are important to you are aligned with somebody that you could potentially be matched with. And it just saves time, right? So that part of the process is really so my clients don't have to go out on 10 dates to then figure out, oh, we're not actually aligned on some of the things that I really need for the future.
Yes.
The other thing that I do is a home tour. So think MTV Crib style, where you're just going to show us around your home. And I do this because I think, your home is your most intimate space. It's the one that you're most in control of. So it's often very reflective of some of the things that are important to you that might not come up in conversation. And so oftentimes, like, I'll just like spot something. I'm like, oh, like, tell me about that. Where did you get that? And then I'll hear about the time that they traveled to, this amazing place and their experience. And so all these things just give me more nuggets to go off of in getting to know a person. And then we also do a reference check where we talk to a friend or family member. And that helps us just to see how, the people closest to you see you. And oftentimes, interestingly, in those calls is where I hear the most positive things about the client. So sometimes people feel sort of weird, like they're bragging on themselves if they're telling me about all their great accomplishments and all the things that they've done. But I've heard things from references like, well, when her book got on the bestseller list, and I'm like, she failed to mention that. So yeah, it's often where I get just a lot of, really positive things about the client.
Yes, got it. I just want to do a quick reset. I have a lot of folks who have just joined. Hello, everyone. My name is Alison. I'm a certified dating and relationship coach, and I primarily work with singles to help them find the love and commitment that we and they deserve. We have Miss Tanisha Wood, who is on the call today. Miss Tanisha, can you reintroduce yourself?
Yes, I am Tanisha Wood. I am a dating coach and matchmaker and founder of the Broomless Matchmaking, which is
nice.
A matchmaking company for Black professionals.
Excellent. Okay, so this sounds intense, which is valuable, right? Because it's helping you get the information you need. You're collecting the data, and then you begin to do your matching. So after the tour, after the conversation, then what?
Yep, that's when we begin looking for your match. So we have a database of eligible people that we then will look through, and then we will go through and vet those people if they have not already been vetted and determine whether we think they're a good match after that vetting. If they are, that's when we set up a date. So like I told you before, I really like activity and sort of active type dates. But sometimes, I definitely have clients that are like, I'm not trying to sweat on a first date, so dinner's fine. So we do a lot of those too. So they'll go on the date, and then after the date, we'll do a feedback call with each person to figure out, how the date went, what they liked, what they talked about, if there was anything that they didn't like. And then this is an important part of the process as well. We do ask both people, is this somebody that you want to continue seeing? And if the answer is yes on both sides, we'll share that information, and then we'll use, we'll share that feedback. And then if the answer is no on either side, we also share that feedback. And that's valuable feedback. Like, that is something that you don't often get. You might go out on a date with somebody, you don't talk to them again, it didn't work out, and you have no idea why. In your mind, you might think, wow, that went really well, and you're waiting for a call, you're waiting for them to ask you back out. Never happens, but you never know why, and you're just left wondering. So, for me, that's a really valuable part of the process, is just understanding, well, why didn't this go well for you? Why didn't you, want to go out again? So we share that feedback. Like I said, if the answer is a no, we use that information to then refine and tweak for the next match. And, another piece of it that I find is when people are dating, particularly online, they, you don't always get the straight up. So you might get a text here and there, they might kind of string you along. But in this process, it's very much, do you want to go out with this person again? Yes or no? Okay, great. Schedule a date. Okay, great. Let's move on. But either way, it's just, it saves a lot of time, just because we're not running around with the ambiguity of what happened.
Right. Absolutely. So if someone is matched, they're going out on dates with someone that you've matched them with, and things are developing, right? Are they allowed to continue to be matched with other people, or they're on one track until that track either runs out or runs down the aisle?
Yes. So I always recommend that people see one person at a time. And it's because what happens when you're seeing multiple people is you're not actually giving your full attention to any one person. So if I'm dating you and I'm dating 3 other people, I might be giving you 30%. You're not going to really like me having experienced 30% of me. So I think the best way to go about it is you see one person, you really get to know them, you really understand if this is a person you could be with, and you continue on. If not, you understand why, and then you move on to the next match. But, you know, I don't believe in like, let's date, you know, 10 people at a time. It's just, it's not conducive to, you know, a long-term relationship in which you really know somebody. If you're just like, look, I just want to have fun, I just want to be in these streets, I just want to see what's out there, date all the people you want.
See, we're a little bit different philosophically that way, but that's okay. And I think of something that's valuable too is in that what you said is that there's so much vetting that happens before they even get on that first date. So more likely than not, that first date will probably go well because you, as the matchmaker, have done so much of the foundational work that the likelihood of that date going to hell is slim to none in comparison to, not to say that they're going to fall in love and get married and have children, but the chances of it going to hell is slim to none because you've done so much work for the client to even see if someone matches with you. I see people saying, finally, someone who agrees with me. She is the professional who has a partner, right, Tanisha?
I do.
Right.
I do.
So you can go ahead and listen all you want, right? But we need to see some results in your own life before you jump on that bandwagon. All right. So again, we talked about this, which I love this process of how intricate it is. Roughly speaking, from the person who does the application to the numbers of people who actually make it on a date, like what does the rejection process look like for you where people aren't ready, aren't serious? Like what does that look like in your business?
That is really tough to say, only because it depends on also the people that we have and the clients that we have at the moment. So if we don't feel like, you know, based on what you're looking for, we're going to have anybody for you, then we don't take you on as a client because it's an investment. We don't want you to waste your time and to waste your money. So sometimes there's situations like that. Sometimes there's situations where people are simply not ready. You know, people are, I need exactly what's on my list, and there's very little, you know, there's very little room there. Because for me, it's just as important for us to have a good relationship as client matchmaker as it is for you to have a good relationship with the person that I connect you with, because this is really the first step to that. So I'm also really big on like just energy and vibe and like us being on the same page and us working together in a really cohesive way, because this is a very personal thing, right? Like you're potentially finding the person that you could be with for the rest of your life. Like I'm going to ask you a lot of personal questions. I am going to request that you are always honest with me, whether it's ugly or not. And so for me, it's really important to have that sort of connection with a client.
Absolutely. So question for the industry, because I'm never fresh enough to ask you this. As a fellow West Indian, I would never ask you. Question for the industry. What does the range of investment look like for someone looking for a matchmaker?
So typically, I don't, you know, generally talk specific pricing, but I will say this, generally with matchmaking, starting usually is around $5,000, and that can go all the way up to, you know, some agencies I've heard, you know, charge in the $75K range. So it is an investment. So people do need to understand that, I think, when they're coming in, because sometimes when people aren't familiar with matchmaking, the assumption is that, well, you know, if I'm paying $45 a month for a dating app, perhaps this is $200 or what, you know. So people do need to understand that. And it's because you are having somebody essentially look for the love of your life on your behalf. And to me, this is one of the things that is worth the investment, because this is the most important decision that you'll make in your life. So I think this is far more important than, you know, where you go to school, where you live, what you do for a living, because your partner will help to determine your trajectory. They can either push you to the sky or derail you completely. And this is a point I stress to men in particular often, like having a good woman by your side will change your life.
Yes, 100%. I have an email series sequence that goes out to those who download my freebies. And one of the emails is titled, "How much would you pay for a husband?" And you know how it goes. You put the real illicit subject
Yep.
line because people are going to click on
Yep.
like, I ain't paying nothing and you're crazy, right? And so in the email, I describe how my husband, this ugly chair, that's my favorite chair from my first apartment. He literally carried this chair on his back and hopped 2 fences in Brooklyn in order to get this chair in my office because it's so wide and awkward and we have an old Brooklyn house, so we couldn't get it the traditional way down the hall.
Right.
My favorite chair on his back, hopping 2 fences. Somebody could have called the cops on this black man. You know what I'm saying? So, and so I'm saying my point is that this is I agree to the most important investment that you can make in your life is who you're going to be sleeping next to, potentially raising children if you decide to have children, and potentially creating a legacy and investment. Like this is not only a life changer for you, this is a generational change, potentially a good one, right?
Absolutely.
Forever. So I agree with you, and I'm telling you, I'm speaking the gospel right with you and telling people this is the most important decision that you can make is who you is. Oh, sorry, girl. Now the good news is that if you've made a mistake, it's not undoable, right? Like divorce exists, breakup exists, but you have to do some reflection on where you've gone wrong.
You have to learn. Yep.
So on that note, do you have instances where you speak to people and just like emotionally or mentally they're not ready for your matchmaking program, and then what do you recommend to them?
So I've definitely talked to people that are fresh out of a divorce, and their inclination is I was used to being in a relationship. I've been in a marriage for the last 15 years. Let me get right back into that, right? And that's always a red flag for me. I don't take people that are separated or that are not fully divorced. And I do prefer to have, like at least a year or more in between that. And it's because I really want people to take the time to learn from that. What happened? What was your role? What would you do differently in the next relationship? Are you still bitter? Are you bitter about men now? Are you bitter about women now? Like, what is your view on relationships? Like, you have to have a positive outlook on relationships and what they can be in order to get a positive and a good relationship. So yes, sometimes when people aren't there yet, I often recommend coaching. So that's one of the things I do to help them get ready and get to a stage where they're ready to be matched. Like it's really pointless to match somebody that's just not at that space, because the relationship just isn't going to work. If you're not at a good place with yourself, you're not going to be at a good place with your partner. So, my advice to people is always get right with you first. Feel good about you so that when you go out there, that is what you're reflecting. Because when people say things like, I never meet the right people, everybody I meet is a bad person and they don't want the same things. And, there's all these like complaints. And I always say, look, your external world is just a reflection of what's happening inside. So I'm not saying bad dates don't happen to good people. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like you have to be aware of what it is that you have inside and that you're putting out there when you go out into the world on a date, etc. And so I really encourage people to take the time, really get to know you, really get to know your needs, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Like, you have to know these things before you just go out there blindly dating, because otherwise you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and just hoping something sticks if you don't know who you are.
Absolutely. Well said. All right, Tanisha, we have a few questions in the question queue. So we want to take those questions. And like, I know that you have a very important event to attend to, and so we don't want to waste any time. The first question is about where you offer your services: nationwide, international, specific cities. How does one work with you according to their location?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have several different target cities. So our target cities are New York, LA, DC, Atlanta, Houston, Chicago, and we're also adding DC. And all that means is that if you're in those cities, we can match you within that city. So if you choose just to date in Houston or just to date in New York, we could do that. If you're outside of those cities, we do ask that you be open to people in those other cities. But so we do work with people. We do work with people nationwide.
All right. And folks are willing to do long distance? Like, that's the thing?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I don't think that is even a barrier anymore, right? So I think the one really positive thing that came out of COVID was that more people started working from home. So most of my clients now work from home. And so I have clients that are dating long distance, and, one person will go to another state, stay a couple weeks, and vice versa. And so I think like the way that the world is shifting and moving now, I don't even think of location as a real barrier. And
Excellent.
if you meet somebody and they're great enough, I look at it like this. You can always find another job. I value love and relationships more than anything. So I think it's so hard to meet the right person that you click with and that you want a life with. And so if you meet that person, find another job. Like, I hate to say that so casually, but it's just how I feel.
I got you. Question in regards to the types of, or the statuses of the people that you match, divorced or single mothers, single dads, like what do we see in your practice and in your work?
Yeah, so most of my clients are in their 30s and are single. Most have never been married, but I do work with people outside of those parameters. So I do work with, single moms and dads, people who have been divorced, people who are older.
Okay. Next question is about attractiveness, because you did talk about that you have this, in-depth process and how you're gathering information, but do you consider attractiveness and when you're matching folks and, your opinion of what's beautiful may not be the other. So how does attractiveness mix into your algorithm or your process when doing your matching?
Yeah. So one of the questions on the initial questionnaire is there's a bunch of photos and it asks you to select, who you are most attracted to. And so we use that just to kind of gauge people's type initially. But that is one of the things that we talk about in depth in the vetting process is, what are you attracted to? And is there any flexibility in that, right? So for some people, they say, look, if I meet you and I don't feel it immediately and I'm not attracted to you, it's probably not going to work. For other people, they say, I've had attraction grow. And so I'm open to somebody who I might not be attracted to initially. And I'm a big believer that attraction can grow. So I think the more that you get to know a person and you're endearing yourself to them and vice versa, they start to become more attractive over
I agree.
time, And so I don't think it's always, oh my God, I didn't think, he was it right away. Like, be open, give it a second. Like I always say, give it a second date.
Okay. The next question is about your database. They want to know, is it balanced? Are you having just as many women as men who are looking, even if you don't do the matching for them for whatever reason, but just numerically speaking, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did before even starting the broom list was we recruited heavily on the male side because we understood that going in, there might be, that mismatch and the tipping of the scale. So we worked pretty hard to make sure that it would be pretty balanced when we started.
Okay. So as of now, it's relatively balanced.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, understood. And we have one more question, and this goes back to what the one thing that that we disagreed on was in regards to that the multi-dating versus not. This person also says, oh, what about women on a biological clock? Isn't it in their best interest to multi-date so that they can have as many options available as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to have options. I'm not saying cut everybody off forever. But what I am saying is if you meet somebody that you like, give that person your focus, time, and energy. Don't give them your focus, time, and energy for 2 years and it's not going anywhere.
Right.
But date this person for a month, maybe 2 months. And if it's not going in the direction that you want, keep moving. So
right.
This doesn't mean that you have to spend all your time just focused on one person forever. But I'm saying in the time that you are getting to know them, at least initially, give them that time. Give them the opportunity to fully get to know you. And, if you're over 30, like time moves fast, right? So if this is going somewhere pretty early and if it's not. And if it's going somewhere, give them that time and truly give them pieces of yourself so that you're assessing, they're assessing. And then if it's not, move on. If it is, keep going.
Excellent response. All right, Tanisha, I'm really big about vetting. You've talked about vetting. And so my last question to you is, how can we vet you? How do we learn more about you, your podcast? Give us all the information we need to learn about you.
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website, which is thebroomlist.com, or on my Instagram at Tanisha Wood. On my website, you'll see just various, platforms that I've been on and shows and things like that. I also have a podcast called DRL Podcast, which is Dating, Relationships, and Love. I've had the podcast for over 5 years now. I talk about a variety of topics. I'm also really big on, just sharing my own personal stories. Like I'm not a person that keeps my work separate from me. So I've had my exes on my show. I've had my friends on my show. I talk, you know, pretty transparently about my own journey and the things that I've been through. And I think that that is something that people should look for in any matchmaker or dating coach. So if somebody is unwilling to share about themselves and their own experiences,
Yes.
I think that's a little bit of a red flag.
Yes.
So just, you know, keep that in mind as you're looking for people to work with on this level, you know, that they're also reciprocating some of the things that they're asking you for.
Yep, absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much, Tanisha, for your time. I really respect the work that you do. It's in perfect alignment with the work that I do. So if there's anyone who's looking for a matchmaker after you've done the work and you're prepared to get on the dating scene and you want to commit, please go ahead and reach out to her. I have pinned her name at the bottom of this live. The live will be saved so you guys can check it out from the beginning. I know you said a lot, but any final words before you let us go?
Key to dating: know you, be you, love you.
Excellent. Well said. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you
Bye.
so much, Alison. I appreciate it. Bye.